I thought I was just another victim of racial profiling at the airport, a spectacle for a bigoted cop. But my humiliation was just a smokescreen, designed to hide a secret that could bring down an entire economy, a secret now hidden in my luggage. The sterile, recycled air of the baggage claim always felt like the finish line of a marathon I didn't sign up for. I was returning from a data analytics conference in Chicago. 3 days of PowerPoints, lukewarm coffee, and networking that felt more like speed dating for nerds. All I wanted was my suitcase, a 30-minute Uber ride, and the familiar comfort of my own couch. I leaned against a pillar, scrolling through emails on my phone, half listening to the rhythmic clunk and whir of the carousel. That's when I felt the shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't anything loud or sudden, just a subtle curdling of the ambient calm. I looked up and saw him, a Port Authority officer with a German Shepherd on a short, taut leash. The officer had that specific kind of posture, shoulders puffed out, chin slightly raised, that screamed he was looking for a reason to be important. His eyes, small and pale, scanned the crowd of weary travelers with a predatory boredom. Then they landed on me. I'm a black man. I'm 6'2". I wear well-tailored suits even when I fly, and I've learned through years of hard experience that my very existence in certain spaces is seen as a provocation. I didn't stare back. I didn't flinch. I just returned my gaze to my phone, projecting an aura of bored indifference I was nowhere close to feeling. My heart had started a low, anxious thrum against my ribs. It was no use. The squeak of his boots on the linoleum grew closer. The dog, a beautiful animal with intelligent eyes, whined softly, its nose twitching. They stopped a few feet away from me. I could feel the heat radiating from the officer's stare. "Got a long flight?" he asked. His voice was a gravelly drawl that didn't belong in a northern city airport. I looked up, meeting his eyes with a carefully neutral expression. "Long enough. Just waiting on my bag." "Uh-huh," he grunted, his gaze flicking down to my briefcase, then back to my face. The dog sat, looking up at its handler, then at me, its tail giving a tentative thump, thump, thump against the floor. "K9 seems to think you're interesting." My blood ran cold. I've seen this play out 100 times on social media, but you're never prepared for the sheer, suffocating humiliation of the spotlight turning on you. "I'm sure he does," I said, my voice steady. "I have a beagle at home. Her scent is probably all over my clothes." "That what it is?" the officer sneered, a smirk playing on his thin lips. He gave the leash a sharp tug. "Or is it something else? Something you brought back from your little trip?" He was baiting me. He wanted a reaction. He wanted the angry black man to make an appearance so he could justify what he was about to do. I wouldn't give it to him. I simply stood my ground, hands visible, phone held loosely. "It was a work conference, officer. The only thing I'm bringing back is a stack of business cards and a caffeine addiction." My calm seemed to infuriate him. People were starting to notice, their tired faces turning from the baggage carousel to the unfolding drama. A few phones were quietly raised. The officer saw it, and his face hardened. He was committed now. He couldn't back down without losing face. "We'll see about that," he snarled. "Let's make this easy. Place your briefcase on the ground and step back." "Officer, you have no probable cause," I began, but was cut short. "My dog is my probable cause," he barked, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. And then he did something I've never seen before, not even in the most viral videos. He unclipped the dog's leash. My stomach plummeted. The dog wasn't aggressive. It trotted over, sniffing curiously at my pant leg, its tail still wagging. But the officer didn't stop there. He strode over to the baggage carousel, which had just coughed up my dark blue, hard-shell suitcase, and grabbed another officer standing nearby, one with a second dog, a black Labrador. "This one," he said, pointing at me, then at my bag. "He's hiding something. I can feel it." Before I could process what was happening, he unleashed the second dog as well. Now 2 powerful, unleashed sniffer dogs were circling me and my luggage as a crowd of strangers watched, their phones recording my degradation. The dogs weren't hostile. They were just dogs. They sniffed my bag, sniffed my shoes, and the German Shepherd even nudged my hand with its wet nose. They found nothing. Of course they found nothing. The officer, his face now a mask of pure, frustrated rage, stormed over and ripped my suitcase off the carousel. "Open it. Now." I complied, my hands trembling slightly with adrenaline and fury. I unzipped the case on the floor, revealing neatly folded shirts, a toiletry bag, and conference binders. He plunged his hands in, tossing my clothes onto the dirty airport floor, searching for a victory that didn't exist. He found nothing. Defeated and red-faced, he kicked my empty suitcase aside and stalked off without another word, his dogs trotting obediently behind him. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of rage. I filed a formal complaint, sent the cell phone footage to local news outlets, and spoke to a lawyer from the ACLU. It felt like a textbook case of racial profiling, egregious but sadly familiar. I thought I knew exactly what this story was about. I was wrong. 2 nights after the incident, there was a knock on my apartment door. It wasn't the police. It was 2 people, a man and a woman, dressed in unassuming gray suits that probably cost more than my rent. They didn't flash badges. They just had an unnerving stillness about them. "Marcus Davies?" the man asked. His eyes were cold and analytical. "Yes? Can I help you?" The woman gave a small, humorless smile. "We hope so. My name is Agent Thorne. This is Agent Shaw. We're not with the Port Authority." I waited. A dozen possibilities raced through my mind, none of them good. Agent Thorne leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper that chilled me to the bone. "We need to talk about what happened at the airport, Mr. Davies. We need to talk about what Officer Miller was really looking for." My living room, usually a sanctuary of calm beiges and soft lighting, suddenly felt like an interrogation cell. I stayed in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, not inviting them in. "I don't understand. What agency are you with?" "That's not important right now, Mr. Davies," Agent Shaw said, her voice smooth but unyielding. "What is important is that Officer Miller is not just a racist patrolman with a chip on his shoulder. He's a compromised asset." The phrase hung in the air between us. Compromised asset. It was language from spy movies, not something you hear in a condo in downtown Baltimore. "Compromised by who?" I asked, my own voice sounding thin. "A foreign intelligence service that has a keen interest in disrupting American financial markets," Thorne explained, stepping past me into the apartment as if he owned the place. Shaw followed, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "We had intel that a courier on your flight from Chicago was carrying a hardware wallet, one containing encrypted access codes to a backdoor program that could do catastrophic damage." I stared at them, my mind struggling to connect the dots. The snarling officer, the dogs, my clothes tossed on the dirty airport floor. It wasn't just a random act of bigotry. It was a calculated operation. "And he targeted me," I said, the words thick with a fresh wave of indignation. "He picked me out of a crowd of hundreds because I was black. That was his plan?" "It was a plan born of desperation and prejudice," Shaw said, her eyes holding a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. "The courier's description was vague. A business traveler in a dark suit. That could be 50 people on any given flight. Miller couldn't just start searching people at random without blowing his cover. So he defaulted to his bias. He chose a target he knew he could harass under the color of authority, a target most people would watch, maybe even film, but wouldn't dare to intervene for. He created a spectacle to cover his real objective. I sank onto my couch, the strength gone from my legs. I wasn't just a victim of racism. I was a tool, a diversion, a human smokescreen. "So, did he find it? This wallet?" Thorne shook his head, his gaze sweeping across my apartment, cataloging every detail. "No. The commotion you endured was, ironically, what saved us. We believe the real courier saw Miller zeroing in on you and panicked. Our surveillance confirms they never made it to the intended handoff point outside the airport. We think they ditched the package." "Ditched it where?" "That's the multi-million-dollar question," Shaw said. "It could have been wiped and dropped in a trash can. Or, in a classic tradecraft maneuver, it could have been slipped onto an unsuspecting third party. A blind mule." She paused, letting the implication land. "Someone like you." My heart, which had just started to slow down, kicked back into overdrive. "You think I have it?" I gestured around my apartment. You want to search my place? After what I just went through? We're not here to tear your home apart, Mr. Davies, Thorne said, his tone softening for the first time. We're here to ask for your help. To us, you're not a suspect. You're the eye of the storm. The one person we know was at the epicenter of this event. We need to meticulously go over everything you brought back with you. Every receipt, every business card, every piece of paper. Anything that could have been planted on you or in your luggage. I was trapped. Saying no felt impossible. These people radiated an authority that made Officer Miller look like a mall cop. With a deep, weary sigh, I nodded. Fine, it's all in my office. For the next hour, they worked with an unnerving, silent efficiency. They didn't rummage. They analyzed. Shaw scanned every document from the conference with a handheld device. Thorne examined the lining of my suitcase and briefcase, his fingers probing for hidden compartments. They found nothing. As they finished up, a sense of relief washed over me. It was over. I was just the guy who had a bad day at the airport. Is that everything from the trip? Shaw asked, looking up from my briefcase. I thought for a moment. Almost. I walked to the kitchen and pointed at the canvas tote bag slumped on the counter. The conference swag bag, it's just full of cheap junk. Branded pens, a stress ball, a few brochures. I was going to throw it all out. Thorne and Shaw exchanged a look. Let's see it, Thorne said. I dumped the contents onto my kitchen island. It was exactly as I described. A pile of corporate detritus. And then Shaw's eyes locked onto something. A small gray USB flash drive. It was flimsy plastic with the logo of a cybersecurity company, Datafort, printed on it. I remembered their booth. 2 eager 20-somethings had been practically forcing them into people's hands. I have dozens of these, I said with a dismissive wave. Uselessly small storage. Thorne picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. Shaw pulled a thin, tablet-like device from her jacket and plugged the USB drive into a port on its side. Her fingers flew across the screen. We all watched in silence. The loading bar on her screen filled, and then a cascade of green text scrolled past far too fast to read. Her posture stiffened. She looked from the screen to Thorne and then to me. The professional calm she had maintained throughout the entire visit vanished, replaced by a look of stark, undiluted alarm. The wallet wasn't a separate device, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The data is partitioned on this drive. It's military-grade encryption. It's here. Thorne's face was grim. So the courier didn't ditch it. No, Shaw said. Her eyes locked on mine. He saw Miller creating a scene with the perfect, unsuspecting mule. He walked by and dropped this into his bag. I stared at the cheap piece of plastic on my kitchen counter. It wasn't a souvenir. It was a time bomb, and the fuse had just been lit. Before I could say a word, a sharp, metallic ping echoed from Thorne's phone. He glanced at it, and his face went white. He looked at the window of my high-rise apartment, then back at me. They know, he said, his voice cold and urgent. Officer Miller just accessed his case report on you from his home computer. He flagged your address. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying certainty. They're coming here. The silence in the room was suddenly deafening, amplifying the frantic thumping of my own heart. They're coming, I repeated, the words feeling clumsy and unreal. Who's coming? Miller's employers, Thorne said, already in motion. He didn't seem panicked, just hyper-focused, like a chess master who's seen the board and is already 5 moves ahead. They're not intelligence officers, they're cleaners, they won't knock. They'll come through the door and they won't leave any witnesses. He looked at Shaw. Go bag. Protocol 7. Shaw was already at my front door, pulling a small, dense brick of what looked like putty from her pocket. She began expertly wedging it into the door jamb near the lock. You have a back way out of this building, Mr. Davies. The service stairs at the end of the hall, I stammered, my brain struggling to catch up to the reality of the situation. People don't send cleaners to a Baltimore high-rise. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I sell data analytics software. Good, Thorne said, grabbing the USB drive from Shaw's tablet. He held it out to me. Put this in your pocket. Do not lose it. You're coming with us. Me? Why? Because right now you're the safest place for it to be, he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. To them, you're just the loose end. The real prize is the hardware. If they see us, they'll assume we have it. They'll focus on us. You're our misdirection. It was a cold, brutal calculation, but I understood it. I was the smokescreen again. Shaw finished with the door and pulled out a device that looked like a TV remote. Set. 30-second delay. She gave me a hard, appraising look. "Mr. Davies, can you run?" I nodded numbly. We slipped out into the empty carpeted hallway. Thorne led the way, his steps silent and purposeful, while Shaw walked backwards behind us, her eyes fixed on my apartment door. We reached the heavy fire door marked stairs, just as the quiet ding of the elevator announced its arrival on our floor. Shaw gave a final glance, then pushed us through the door, letting it swing shut with a heavy thud. The stairwell was cold and smelled of concrete and stale air. We didn't run. We descended at a controlled, rapid pace. 3 floors down, a muffled thump vibrated through the building, so faint I might have imagined it, if not for the grimly satisfied look that passed between the 2 agents. The shape charge, just enough to jam the lock and delay them. We exited into the parking garage, the smell of exhaust fumes a welcome change. Thorne led us to a nondescript black sedan parked in a visitor's spot. We piled in, and he pulled out into the night with a smoothness that defied the urgency of our escape. As we rounded the corner, I looked back and saw 2 men in dark hoodies trying to pry open the main entrance to my building. Cleaners. "Where are we going?" I asked, the adrenaline finally starting to recede, leaving a shaky exhaustion in its wake. "Somewhere safe," Shaw said from the front seat, her eyes scanning the rearview mirror. "We have a secure location a few miles from here." The next few hours were a surreal blur of debriefings in a windowless room that felt like it was miles underground. I told them everything I could remember about the airport, the conference, the swag bag. They recorded it all with a detached professionalism that was somehow both comforting and terrifying. Around dawn, Agent Thorne came back into the room. He looked tired but resolute. "We got him," he said simply. "Miller. Picked him up an hour ago trying to flee the state. He's already singing. It's over, Mr. Davies." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. "And the others? The cleaners? They're ghosts. They'll disappear back into the woodwork for now. But we've crippled their operation in the city. The data on that drive is a Rosetta Stone for their entire network. This is a major win." He paused, looking at me with a newfound respect. "You handled yourself well. Most civilians would have folded." "I was running on pure fear," I admitted. He allowed himself a small smile. "Sometimes that's the best fuel. Now, let's talk about your future." That was the part that scared me. Am I going to have to disappear? Change my name? No. That would draw more attention than letting things go back to normal, he explained. As far as the world is concerned, this never happened. Your complaint against Officer Miller will be validated. He'll be fired for racial profiling and gross misconduct, which he is in fact guilty of. He'll even face federal charges, though the public will never know the full extent of them. You'll receive a formal apology from the Port Authority and a substantial settlement. You'll be the man who stood up to a racist cop, and won. I was silent for a long moment, processing the elegant, brutal simplicity of it all. They were burying a national security crisis under a story that, just 3 days ago, had been my entire reality. The ugly, infuriating truth would become a convenient lie to hide a much deeper one. "You'll be safe," Thorne continued, as if sensing my unease. "The people Miller worked for now know that we have the data. Coming after you would be pointless and would only expose them further. You're no longer a target." A week later, I was sitting on my couch, a new couch in a new, fully furnished apartment that the government had quietly arranged for me. My story was all over the local news. I was a symbol, a minor celebrity in the fight against injustice. It was a strange, hollow victory. I knew the real story, the one with spies and assassins and a flash drive that could have toppled an economy. But as I watched the news report, seeing Officer Miller in handcuffs, his smug face finally wiped clean of its arrogance, I felt a different kind of satisfaction. The reason he targeted me was racism. The reason his life was now in ruins was treason. In a strange twist of fate, his own bigotry was the instrument of his downfall. He had picked me out of a crowd to be a victim, and in doing so had inadvertently made me the key to his undoing. They never found the courier, the ghost who dropped the drive in my bag. I guess some loose ends are never tied up, but mine was, and for the first time since I stepped off that plane, I finally felt like I could breathe again.